Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Memtet. We are at the top of Memtet, about 11 or 12 lines down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep, 12 lines down, middle of the line, Amar of Papa. So yesterday we concluded by citing a brisa that confirmed that once the Na'ara Ha'urasa, the woman who is a Na'ara and who has done the step of Kedushin / Erisin of marriage, but has not done Nisuin. So once she's handed over to the agents of the husband, so then she's no longer subject to the rules of the Na'ara Marusa. So again, remember that those rules are that there's a that the person who has relations with her is going to be subject to skila, meaning that death penalty by stoning, and then the person and she herself will also be subject to that death penalty, and she will be stoned at the door of her father's house, and that is going to be her punishment. However, if on the other hand it is she is not in that category of Na'ara Murasa, but rather just a married person, just a married person, she can sit where if she wants to on the couch. So if she's just going to be, if the person is just a regular married person, so then the punishment would be chenek, strangulation, not skila. And so the case is that if in fact once she's given over to the husband, even though they have not yet done nisuin, that is already, she's left her father's house, and so as a result, it's there's no longer the category of Na'ara Murasa, but rather she is already considered almost like she's married, even though she hasn't done nisuin. She still has to do nisuin before she can have relations with her husband, but the punishment has already changed as if she had already been married. And so now we begin by citing two Mishnayos. One, Rav Papa is going to cite a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, and then Rav Nachman will cite another Mishnah in Sanhedrin, and we'll show that how those Mishnayos can also be understood as telling us the same lesson, namely that once the woman, even though she's only done Erisin, has been handed to her husband, then there's no longer the Na'aram or Rasas situation. It is now as if she were fully married. So let's take a look. So Amar Papa Avananami Pnina, we actually have a Mishnah that says the same concept. And again, this Mishnah is in Sanhedrin Daf Samach Vav Amud Bet, and it says there's I have a typo here, so I said 86 on my screen, but it says 66. So then what does the Mishnah say there? Haba al Na'ara Morasa. If somebody has relations with a Na'ara who is already done Erisin, so Eino Chayev Ad Shetehe Na'ara Bisula Ma'orasa. There are four categories. What are the four categories? One is she needs to be a Na'ara. That's the ages between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half. She has to be a Bisula. She has to be a virgin. She has to be Ma'orasa. She has to only have done Erisin and not Nisuin. And she needs to be in her father's house. So we're going to now go through. So Bishleim and Na'ara below Bogeris, right? So what is the idea of Na'ara here? It means a Na'ara, but not a Bogeret, meaning somebody who is, once she turns 12 and a half, this penalty doesn't apply any longer. Bitula below Bi'ula, right? She has to be a virgin. She cannot have had marital relations. Ma'orasa below Nisua. And again, it tells us that she has to be have done Erisin, Kedushin, but not have done the full chuppah, and not done Nisuin. So beves havia lemu'ute mai. Well, what does the words beves havia come to teach us? So lav lemu'ute masar ha'av l'shluchei habal. So the Gemara asks, or on behalf of Rav Papa there, Rav Papa says, isn't it in order to deliver her husband? That the point is that once she's been delivered from the house of her father to the husband's house, even if it's just to his agents, So then she's no longer covered by the Na'ara Morasa, and the Gemara doesn't even address it. The Gemara doesn't answer that. So the answer is yes. In fact, that is the case. You have taught an appropriate lesson. And so again, this Mishnah confirms that if you hand the woman over, so then she's no longer subject.
Didn't we have this already?
I'm sorry?
Didn't we have this already? Like these categories? Didn't we see this already? Once before, like a week ago or so?
I mean, we've seen this generally,
Like
but I think
Na'ara, Betula, or
yes, well, there we were talking about where a man, where we weren't talking about where she was an Arison. There we were talking about an unmarried woman and the obligations of the man to marry her. Here we're talking about a married woman and which will result in the death penalty for the two of them. So that's the difference between what we've seen earlier and this and this situation.
It just reminded me of that. So
yeah, they're very similar. The same concepts apply as well. So you're absolutely right to raise that. So Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So Afan on Namitin, we have another Mishnah. This one on Daf Pei Tet Amud Aleph. So Haba al Eishes Ish. So when it comes to a woman who has relations, once she went into her husband's domain in order to perform marriage, even though they haven't yet had relations, then it's no longer subject to stoning, but rather the Mishnah in Sanhedrin tells us that it's subject to chenek, strangulation, indicating that she's no longer considered in the category of Na'ara Morasa. And so Nichnas al Rishus Habal Ba'alma. So what does it mean? It means her entering her husband's domain any amount, meaning even if it's not with a full chuppah, even if she has not done nisuin. So Shema Mina, in fact, we can learn from here. So as a result, we've now brought several different proofs. And in fact, the conclusion is that a Na'ara Morasa doesn't really apply today because we have zero time between Erisin and Nisuin. And of course, most brides are not between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half. So, but at the same time, from a conceptual perspective, the idea is that once she's handed over to her husband's agents or to her husband, even though they have not done the final step of marriage, she's no longer, it's almost as if she's no longer considered just an Arison. She's almost as if she's in Nisuin as well.
But how do you understand, like the agents are coming to her father's house?
Yes,
and taking her to the chuppah. Usually it would be like her own, what you would think it would be her own parents, her own father would take her.
Well, yes, I understand that, but think about I watched the musical Six a couple of weeks ago.
I haven't seen that, so you'll have to tell me.
Well, so that's about the 6 wives of Henry VIII.
Oh yeah, right.
And so the point is that what?
Henry VIII.
Yeah, Henry VIII was not a good person. Anyway, the point is that sometimes marriage involves the woman going to the home of the husband and getting shipped off overseas. I mean, even today, God forbid, that can happen. So the point is that that's the situation that we're talking about. The husband lives somewhere else. There was an arranged marriage between the two families. Obviously, a little more likely when you had rulership involved, some kind of kingship involved. So as a result, there was part of peace treaties involved sending daughters away. But the point is that here we have similarly, the girl is getting married and she's going to another country or another city to go live with her new husband, and somebody's going to watch over her to make sure that she makes it to the new place safely. And right. Of course it could be her parents, her father's agents. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It could also be the husband's agents. And the idea here is that once she has left her father's house, that is when it no longer makes sense to have the concept in the Torah. Remember, the concept in the Torah is that on some level, we're going to be embarrassing and shaming the father, because where is the stoning going to happen? It's going to happen outside the father's house. So there is clearly an intent, a sense of responsibility, even though obviously she's an adult in the terms of from a human court perspective. We're treating her like we're recognizing that there was some fault in her raising, and that is why she's going to be stoned outside her father's house. Well, once we hand her over to the husband's agents, so then the responsibility is no longer strictly with her father. And
Right.
so that is why that's the
It
concept
would be an
that we're talking.
interesting case if it was she's not in that physical house anymore, but it's her father's agents that are taking her to her husband.
So if it's her father's agents, then let's say she moves out at the age of 12, and she has her own home, but her father's agents are taking her. I think that she would still be, until she actually goes into somebody else's. Very, like I said, this is some of this is very hard in our modern sensibilities. That until she goes into somebody else's domain, until she goes into somebody else's rishus, she's still in her father's rishus.
Right,
So
but with our modern marriage ceremony, it's almost as if because the parents usually accompany.
Yep.
Right? It's
Yes,
almost like
absolutely.
they're handing them over to, right?
That
And
is
it's
correct. That is correct. Then when the bride walks down with her parents, and that's often we see, some people have the custom that the man then goes out to greet her and then
right.
take her the last steps. Then that's exactly what's going on here. That's exactly what's going on. So once the man goes out to greet her and begins to take her, even though they have not yet gotten to the chuppah, then she's no longer the Na'ara Maris. Of course, we also have the Erisin underneath that same chuppah. So in fact, she isn't even, although she isn't even technically have an Arusha at that moment, but in any event, you could see those elements in the ceremony. All right, so now we go to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah teaches that there is not an obligation for a father to feed his daughter. A remarkable statement. But the Mishnah is going to suggest that this comparison of son's inheritance and the obligation to feed the daughter from the estate reflects that both happen after the father dies. So let's take a look. A father is not obligated to provide food for his daughter. Midrash Darash Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. This was a drasha, a derivation that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah learned in front of the Chachamim, the Keren B'Yavna, when the Sanhedrin was in Yavne after it had left Yerushalayim. So Habanim, what did he say? And Keren B'Yavne, Rashi explains, Al Shem Shehayu Yoshin Shurot Kerem, that it was called a vineyard. Kerem is a vineyard, but it was called that because they all sat in rows. I don't know whether they had tables, but they sat in rows, similar to how we have in modern yeshivas today. So Habanim, and what did he say? Habanim Yershu v'Habanos Yizono, that the sons inherit and the daughters get fed, okay, from the father's estate. So Ma Banim Einan Yorshin Elul Achar Misasav. When is it that the inheritance happens? That happens after the father dies. That we only take the money away from the sons when it's the father has died. If the father has not yet died, then he is, there's an idea that he should feed, and as we'll say in just a moment, but there is no absolute obligation. So we won't actually, literally come and force him physically.
This applies to sons too?
The excellent question, and we're going to touch on that in the Gemara. So let's take a look in the Gemara so that we can get this. So the Gemara is now going to suppose two implications of our Mishnah, but then it will note that these two implications leave our Mishnah with no potential author. We're going to look at three different positions, and none of them will be consistent with the position of our Mishnah if our Mishnah is understood to imply these two implications. And so as a result, we will reject the two implications, and we will show how the Mishnah can go according to all three possible opinions. So the Gemara says, what is it that you're not chayav? You're not chayav to feed a daughter. The implication is that, exactly as Hanan, I think, was suggesting, that maybe the implication from this Mishnah could be that you are obligated to feed your sons. So, and Bito Nami, Chovahu Deleka, and although there is no absolute obligation to feed one's daughters, there is still a commandment to do so. So again, we've come up with two derivations, two implications of our Mishnah. One is that for boys, there is an obligation, and although there's no obligation for girls, there's a mitzvah to do it. So
what is the difference between a chayov and a mitzvah? I mean, isn't it the same thing?
No. A chiyuv, the court will enforce and say, again, even against the person's will, because it's an obligation. Whereas a mitzvah,
is a commandment.
A mitzvah is a commandment, but it's more like a mitzvah aseh, or even not less than that. Meaning, the idea is that it's a good thing to do. Here we're using mitzvah in the more colloquial sense, it seems.
Yeah,
and the idea is that it's not something that will obligate, but we're not going to punish the guy if he doesn't. But we're going to, and we'll see exactly what we mean by that, because we're going to lead from this Gemara into the takanot that were made in Usha, and one of them will deal with feeding, and we'll see exactly what was done, what is considered forcing, and what's not considered forcing. Now, did that answer?
Like you're supposed to do it, the court's not going to force you.
That is correct. That is a good analogy, and we'll see that analogy, and that analogy will become a little complicated as we move forward. So we don't know yet. That's where we got to stay tuned. So Mani Masnisin. So who is our Mishnah? So low Rabbi Meir, it can't be Rabbi Meir. Low Rabbi Yehuda, it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. But low Rabbi Yochanan and Broka, it's not Rabbi Yochanan and Broka. And those are the only three opinions that we're going to have in this price of Titania. Mitzvah lazunis habanos. There's a mitzvah to feed the daughters. Well, that's consistent. Kal v'chomer labanim, and certainly the sons. Well, that says that there's a mitzvah for sons, not a chiyuv. The aske b'Torah, because they are learning Torah. So divrei Rabbi Meir. So that is Rabbi Meir's opinion. So Rabbi Meir, we'll see. We already have seen that it can't be him, because he says that it's a mitzvah for sons, not a chiyuv. Rabbi Huda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says mitzvah lazon es habanim. It's a mitzvah to feed the sons, kal v'chomer labanos. So certainly it should be a mitzvah to feed the daughters. Again, doesn't work with our implication number one, because our implication number one is that it's more than just a mitzvah to feed the sons. It was a chiyuv to feed the sons.
What's the kal v'chomer here?
So the kal v'chomer for Rabbi Meir is.
No, we're Rabbi Yehuda.
Because mishum zilusa. So that those are the next words tell us the reason, because of disgrace, right? We're worried about the disgrace of daughters more than we're worried about the disgrace of sons. And so as a result, we don't want them to have to go beg. And so as a result, if we have a mitzvah to feed the sons, then certainly we'll have a mitzvah to feed the daughters.
It looks better if the sons are begging than if the daughters are begging?
Yes, absolutely. That's certainly the implication.
Okay.
Yeah.
To fathom all this, because how in God's name are you to give the daughters away in marriage if you can't feed them?
Yeah, well, no, that's the point. That's why you give them away. You can't feed them. That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. I mean, and it's hard for us to contemplate it, but thank God that even those who are hungry, in general, most of them don't have this level of hunger that we're talking about here. Here we're talking about, real, distressed poverty. And, thank God we don't in general know what this is like. So, and how much more so we should do to try and prevent it. All right. So that was the first two opinions, that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. What about Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka? Well, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Omer, chova lazunes habanos la'achar misas avihin, that there's an obligation, yet this everybody agrees to, that there's an obligation to feed the daughters after the father's death. Aval b'chayei avin Elu ve'elu einen izonin, that there isn't even a mitzvah to feed either the boys or the girls. Well, that's again, that isn't consistent with any aspect of our two derivations. So mani masnisin, Rebbe Meir, if you wanted to say it's a Rebbe Meir, ha amar banim mitzvah. The Rebbe Meir says that it's a mitzvah for the sons, not a chiyuv. Rebbe Yehuda, ha amar banim nami mitzvah. He also says that it's a mitzvah for the sons. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, afilu mitzvah nami leika. He doesn't even say that there's a mitzvah for the sons or the daughters. So it doesn't fit, doesn't work. So Ibayas Ema Rabbi Meir, Ibayas Ema Rabbi Yehuda, Ibayas Ema Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Actually, we're going to reject our derivations, and we can say that in fact it could be any of the three of them. Ibayas Ema Rabbi Meir v'hachi kamar ha'av enu chayav v'mezonos bito v'hu adin livno. So when our Mishnah says that the father is not obligated to feed the daughter, it's not saying only daughters and not sons. The same thing is true for sons. Mitzvah bevito ika, but the implication is, and this one is a valid implication, that there is a mitzvah, and kal v'chomer labanim, and certainly there would be a mitzvah for sons. Okay, v'hai diktani bita. Well, why did we only mention daughters in our Mishnah? Kamash Malan, it comes to teach us as we turn to Mem Terem Bet, that even a daughter, there would not be, even though there's no obligation to feed a daughter, ha mitzvah ika, there still is a mitzvah, because I might have thought that there wouldn't be even a mitzvah because the sons are treated better than the daughters, and there is a mitzvah for the sons. So maybe there'd be only a mitzvah for the sons and not for the daughters. So Kamash Malan comes to teach us, Rabbi Meir, that there actually is a mitzvah for the daughter.
I'm having trouble understanding what the word mitzvah here means. You know, it's not an obligation. Obviously, it's a good thing. If we're reading it in a colloquial sense, it's a mitzvah to feed your children. I mean, how could you know what I mean? I mean, if we're just saying mitzvah means like you're supposed to do it or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, look.
So I'm not sure I understand.
I don't know if you were able to hear James's analogy, but James commented that it's like giving tzedakah. That just as giving tzedakah, we say, you know, it's actually an absolute positive commandment. So too, you know, this is an absolute positive commandment. We're just not going to force anybody to give tzedakah, whether it's to your children or to somebody else. So, you know, again, it's hard for us to understand because, of course, I think we all have this natural inclination. But I think that there, you know, in the olden days, it was not even that long ago, of course, children were viewed as a potential asset to help the family survive. And if they weren't able to help the family survive, so then, you know.
Is it an obligation to feed your slaves?
We saw actually just recently that a Jewish slave, yes, but a non-Jewish slave, no.
So if it's an obligation to feed your Jewish slave, wouldn't it be a kal v'chomer to feed your children?
I don't think so. I think that actually, because the Jewish slave situation, you voluntarily sort of taken that on. You know, given the mitzvah of procreation and lack of ability to necessarily control that, you know, you don't have that same situation with respect to children. So. You know, when you actually bought the slave, so you bought additional obligations that come with it.
Okay, that's a fun. Yeah, all right.
Again, none of this is easy.
No, it's a good answer. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I don't think it explicit. Well, it's certainly implicit, the fact that you have to feed the slave. Yes. All right. So the Ibai is saying Rabbi Yehuda. Or we could say it's actually Rabbi Yehuda Gahachi Kamar, and this is what we're saying. Again, language from our Mishnah: the father is not obligated to feed his daughter. And he's certainly not obligated to feed his son. And there's a mitzvah to feed a son, and certainly there's a mitzvah to feed a daughter. And why did we specifically say that the daughter is not, it has no obligation. Kamash Milan dafilu bito chova leka. I might have thought that there would be a chova for it. So again, so the point is for Rebbe Meir, the mentioning of the daughter is to emphasize that there's at least a mitzvah. For Rebbe Yehuda, the mentioning of the daughter is to emphasize that although that there isn't a chiyuv. Okay, and we can even say our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. That you're not chayav to feed your son, your daughter, and you're not even chayav to feed your son. And there isn't even a mitzvah. And that the point is that since after the death there is an obligation for the estate to feed the daughters, so taninami ain't a chayav. So because of the future obligation after death, that is why they taught about chiyuv. But in fact, it would be a bigger teaching to say there isn't even a mitzvah. So now we've shown how our Mishnah can actually go according to all three opinions.
Be an incentive for the daughters to kill their fathers to get fed.
Yeah, there would be that irony of a situation. Okay,
You can't if he won't feed you, while he's alive, but he will feed you when he's dead. Then
Yeah, no, I am not disagreeing with you. I agree that it sets up an odd situation. All right, so now, but we're now going to, it's not as if this difficulty was not obvious to the Gemara. And so we're going to do two things. The first is we're going to teach a takana from Usha, and then we're going to go through and see whether the takana in fact was enforced. A takana is a decree, and we're going to see. We're going to do three efforts to show, and all three efforts will show that in fact the decree was not enforced, and we'll see what rabbis did in order to make sure that daughters were taken care of. So Amar Rabbi Ilah, Amar Reish Lakish. So Rabbi Ilah said in the name of Reish Lakish that Mishum Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Chanina, Be'usha hitkenu, that they enacted when the Sanhedrin was in Usha. So then they made the following decree: She'ehei Adam Zan Espana be'Esbenosav Kishahin Kitanim. That there is in fact an obligation to feed sons and daughters when they are minors. Now, Tosos here, top Tosos on Memtera Mabet says that, one second, are you telling me that it took until the time of Usha to have any kind of decree that says that you need to feed your children? That's ridiculous. So the implication is about Ktanik Tanim, when it comes to the youngest of children, which is defined as under the age of 6, L'kuli al mechayev. Everybody agreed that there was a chiyuv. K'da amar besof apal pi, as we'll say, at the end of the coming perek, that there is an obligation for the youngest children. So when we say that there's no obligation for children whatsoever, we're actually talking about children that are older than 6, which of course was in those days, not too more than a couple of generations ago, was a time that children began to go out to the workforce to work, and so as a result, that was when they were began to lose an obligation to feed them, because they were supposed to at least cover their own sustenance, if not actually. Yeah, it's true. Still today in many countries, unfortunately. All right. So now the Ibailahu, Hilchasa Kavase, ain't Hilchasa Kavase. When we said all of this, that there was now a takana for older children, is that in fact the halacha or not? So Tashma. So a couple of stories. So story number 1. Kihava Asul Kamei de Rabbi Yehuda. There was a father who didn't. So when it came in front of Rabbi Yehuda, the Amora. So what came before him? Obviously, it was a father who was not supporting his children. Amr lahu, he said to them, Yarod Yalda, a jackal gave birth, v'abnei masa shadja, and then through the needs of its offspring, gone on the rest of the people of the town. Of course not. The point is that we're going to embarrass the guy in order to say, that you need to feed him, you feed your children. But what didn't he do? He didn't basically beat the guy until he fed the children. And so that implies that in fact there is no actual obligation. Again, it's just a mitzvah. So kiha, and then another story, a similar outcome. Kihava asal kamei de Rav Chisda. When they came in front of Rav Chisda, Amar lahu, kafulei asisa b'tzibura. Go turn over a kli, a box in public, and you're going to go presumably to stand on the box. So take a look in Rashi. Kafu machteshes alpia. Turn over a mortar. A mortar, the thing in which you stick the pestle into to crush things. So this is a large one, obviously. It's sort of like a drum, and you go and you flip it over and you stand on the drum. V'yamod zeh al gav shulei, and you go and the person himself will stand on top of it. Bigova in the higher heights, because he'll be standing on top of it. Sheyishmeu kolo, so that his voice will be able to be heard. V'yachriz al atzmo, and he'll call out about himself. Shehu ram min ha'oravim. He's worse than the ravens, which we'll talk about in a moment. The urva by bunny, because the ravens want their children. V'ahu gabra lo by bunny, and he doesn't want his children. Okay, so that's explanation number one. And some people say, no, it's not the guy himself, but rather we have one of the agents of the court stand up on there, but Yomer Kane, and he says, Al Oto Ish. He says the same thing about that.
Well, where is this Rashi?
This is Rashi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 lines down in the narrow line.
I got it.
Okay. So B'leikum B'leima, and so what does he get up on there and say? I should have probably read the Gemara on before getting to the Rashi. Urva boy bunny, even a raven wants children. V'ahu gavra lo boy bunny, but this guy doesn't want his children. 1 second. So the Gemara asks for Urva boy bunny. Does a raven really like its children? V'haksiv livnei orev asher yikra'u. Right in a pasuk that shows that the young ravens are the baby ravens, they have to call out to God, and God is the one who provides the feed for them. It says this pasuk is in Tehillim.
We read this every day.
Yeah, we say it every day. It's part of the Hallelujah.
Yes,
exactly. Good recognition. So right, so that the ravens, the young ravens, call out to Hashem, and Hashem feeds them, meaning that the adult ravens, the parents ravens, are not taking over, they're not taking care of them. So lo kashya, so there are two ways to understand this. The one is talking about the chivore, the white ravens. One is talking about the black ravens. One way to understand it is that there are different kinds of ravens. That there are different species of ravens, and that the one of the ravens, whether it's the white or the black, take care of them, and the other one does not. The alternative understand is that the ravens change their color from when they're very, very young to as they mature. And when they're very, very young, the ravens turn white, and so as a result, they are not being cared for by their parents because their parents don't recognize them. But eventually, they do recognize them. And so the idea is that, and the reason that works very nicely here is that we're not talking about the youngest of children, that we already agree that there is actually a chiyuv. So, but we're talking about the older children, and the older children, when the ravens have now turned black, you'd expect, as your child gets older and you begin to see in them more of yourself, you'd expect the parents to take even greater care of them. And yet this father was not taking care of his child. So again, what didn't we do? Again, we didn't beat the father. We only tried to embarrass him with words. So kihava asa lekame de Rava amrle nichalach v'mitazne b'nech mitzdaka. That when a father, again, another person came in front of Rava, again, a situation where a father was not feeding his children. So Amrle, so he said to him, Nichalach mitazne b'nech mitzdaka. You want your children to be fed from tzedakah? Of course not. So you're again, we're shaming the man, but not actually compelling him. Below Amran Ella Delo Amid. But all of this is assuming that we're talking about somebody who's really poor, that they don't have the funds. Abal Amid, if you he is wealthy, if you can see that the person has the necessary funds, well then Kafin and Leal Karche, then we will force him. So Kihada Rava Kafia Rav Nasan Bar Ami, just as Rava forced Rav Nasan Bar Ami, but Apik Mine Arba Meazuzah, he forced him to give 400 for charity. This the point is that he forced him.
Yeah, but still not a chova. But we're
No. I think the way I'm understanding is that if they have the funds, then we'll do whatever it takes to actually force them.
But it's still not technically a chova.
Correct, but it's still not technically a chova. Absolutely, you 100%.
It's like trying to get a guy to give a get or something like that, right?
Agreed. But actually, give a get in that situation would be a chova, and we do. And that we would use the same technical requirements. So there is an aspect of chova associated with it. So I'm not 100% sure that I would quite call it not a chova, but the bottom line is that certainly there would be some kind of forcing of the situation. Okay, so that is kind of number one in Usha, is to feed older children. And we say that, in fact, that takana was not enforced, that there was no physical obligation, that instead we have just moral persuasion, except for where there's definitely the funds. And then when there's definitely the funds, so then we'll force the person.
So how do you understand that verse from Tehillim, that God will provide? So the father will just say, it's okay, God will provide, that kind of thing?
Well, no, the verse from Tehillim is showing how, is trying to counter the concept about the ravens, where we said that the raven parents are taking care of them. So but we seem to say that the raven parents don't take care of their children.
Right, because they say God will provide.
Because God will provide, exactly. That's exactly right. But I don't think that they're trying to make an analogy of that to the parent situation.
Really? I think they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have, because, God will provide, go out, it's all from Hashem, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, well,
that's kind of the attitude, I think.
That you're absolutely right, that is the attitude. So to the extent that it's picking up on that, then you're absolutely right. I mean, again, the from a technical perspective of what the Gemara is doing, it's asking a question, but I think you're right to highlight that the implication is that is the attitude that the father is having when he doesn't feed his children. So it could be an implied additional concept. So now we're going to do a second takana in Usha. So Amar Rabbi Rish Lakish, Be'usha Hitkanu. What was a second takana in Usha? Hakoziv kol nechasav levanav hu ve'ishto nizona mehen. If parents give all their assets to their children while they are alive, so then the man and his wife will be able to continue to live from those assets. So again, the idea is that you were not going to let a person impoverish himself and then become an object of being sustained by the public, but rather we're going to obligate the children to sustain him. So again, Maskifla Rabbi Zera Be'itim Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. So they ask, Gedola Mizo Amru. 1 second, this is not some great statement. We already have an even more remarkable rule. Almana Nizonos Minichasav, that we have a widow is going to be sustained from the property of her husband. And we're going to say, well, why is that so remarkable? We're going to explain that in a moment. So he, along with his wife, should certainly be supported. And so what is that case of the woman being sustained? So let's take a look. To Shalach Ravin Be'igarte, because Ravin sent and said in the following in his letter, Misha Mace, if a man dies, and he leaves over his daughter, only a daughter and a widow. Almana nizonas minachasav. His widow will be fed from this from his property. Nises Habas. Now the daughter marries somebody else, and the daughter inherited all that property, but now she's married to somebody. So now the husband will inherit the daughter. So almanaso nizonos minachasav. So now again, the widow is going to continue to be sustained from the property of the father. But Mesa Habas, the daughter now dies, and so is inherited by her husband. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Achoso shel Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina al yadi hayamaisa. I actually had this happen to me. And the widow is continued to get sustained from the property, even though now not only is it no longer the daughters, it's now the husbands of the daughters, and so it belongs to somebody who's not even any way related to.
I don't understand. How did the husband of the daughter get this? Isn't it like proper separated property that came into the marriage before?
Yes, but the point is that she died. So even though if she left the marriage, she would take it with her. If she dies, her husband inherits.
She had a prenup.
Well, but the point is that you don't need the prenup, because the mother-in-law now gets fed from the estate, even though the estate is now owned by the son-in-law.
Yeah, but she can't get the estate. The wife can't get the estate?
No, the wife doesn't get the estate. The wife doesn't inherit.
Okay.
I mean, the wife never inherits, even if the woman dies, if the man dies without children, the wife doesn't inherit. All right. And of course, that is exactly going to be the Gemara's response. So Ma'odetainment. So actually, we do have. It is important for us to teach this lesson, right? So the lesson is that, or the argument is that we don't need to teach the lesson about the fact that the father and the couple get fed from the estate when the man gives it all to his children during his lifetime, because of course the woman's going to get fed. She gets fed from that estate, even if it's not even owned in the family any longer. So of course she's going to get fed, and so presumably the man will get fed. So Ma'odetainment, no. What might I have said? Because there's nobody to work. Here, the man gave all his stuff away, but he still exists. He could still work. He can work for himself and for her. So Kamash Malan, not so. So now they ask the question, is the halacha like this takana? Or is the halacha not like this takana? So Tashma will come and teach, and we're going to see exactly that it's not like this. And so to Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonasan, Havu Kaime Asahu Gabra. So Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonasan were once standing; they were together, and a guy came by, Gachim v'nashke l'Rabbi Yochanan Akarai, and he came and he kissed Rabbi Yonasan on his feet. Amrle, Rabbi Chanina said to him, "My high, what's going on?" So Amrle, Kosev nechasav levanavu. This guy, he had written all of his possessions to his children. V'asisinu lizane, and I encouraged them, I forced them to feed him. So amras bishlama lavdina. So mishum haki asinu. If you say that in fact that the halacha is not like this takana from Usha, well then it all makes sense. That's why he had to encourage them. He had to get them to feed. Ela'i, because he didn't actually force them. Ela'i amradina asinu badai. Boy, what kind of forcing would be required? What kind of it would be an actual chova. It would be something that you'd be able to force in a more a physical manner. So the point is that presumably and in addition, the idea is that why would the guy be thankful to him if in fact he was just enforcing the law? Why would you even need to? Why would the guy be kissing his feet? He's kissing the feet because he was going, Luthi Mishur Sadin, So as a result, that is, so we see that even this takana as well, we don't actually paskin like it. But we are going to have some other interesting takanot, God willing, and the third of the three takanot of Usha, God willing, we'll begin with that tomorrow.
What's the difference between the force of a takana and a chova? It seems like
No, that the implication is that if a takana is in fact accepted, it would have the obligation, exact same obligation as a chova. And that's the question that's being asked. Are we implying a chova here or are we not?
So the purpose of the takana would be to make it to turn it something that doesn't have a source, that it's a chova into a chova, even though we don't have like a biblical source for it or something.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly right. That we're going.
Okay. So it's like there's a gap in the law. We want the law to be something, but we don't have a source for it. So therefore, we're going to just make it.
Correct. That's what effectively a takana does. Is we don't have a source for something, but we want to create something, and so therefore we're going to create it. This is different from a gzera, which is more like to protect or ensure avoidance of a mitzvah. This is going to be more a positive kind of act in order to try and create something new. That's how I understand the difference between those two concepts.
Right, but so the if you violate a takana, it's rabbinic. The rabbis can make up whatever punishment they want or something, right?
Correct. And of course, we utilize the biblical commandment that you need to listen to the chachamim.
Right.
So in order to get that, in order to create a biblical enforcement mechanism that would apply to takanot of the Rabbanan.
But technically, if you violate a chova, you're obligated for a korban or something like that, right?
Yes. Presumably, if you fail to do something, you would, there are certain rules, right, for a chova. Meaning, I don't think you aren't obligated for a korban if you fail to give tzedakah, even though that
right.
know. But
there's no takana that you have to give.
But there's no takana. Exactly.
But you're not obligated for violating a takana. It would be rabbinic. It would not be like a korban or something.
Correct. And indeed, we mentioned, and I didn't go into it because for time reasons, but we mentioned the fact that who was forced to give, Rava forced Rav Nassan Bar Ami to give tzedakah. And so Tosfos asked, I don't understand, how could he be forced to give tzedakah? And so he offers three different answers. One is that he was forced with words, so it's not a problem. But that doesn't really work well, because the whole implication here is that we would force physically. And so the idea is that we would force because there were also negative commandments associated with it, or because the community had accepted upon itself this obligation, and so as a result, that became it effectively became like a chova. But the idea is to turn the mitzvah of tzedakah from a general mitzvah to the category of chova. And so that is exactly what's going on here. Is how can we try and do that? All right. Have a wonderful day. See you all tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you.
All right. Be well.
Right at the top of the page, we're saying father has to support them after he dies. Therefore, we understand he doesn't support them in his lifetime.
Yes, that's how we began. Correct.
At the bottom of the page, we say the father is supported after the husband dies. Therefore, we learn that she has to be supported in his lifetime. There are two different, the opposite thing.
Yes, but of course yes, good catch. That's an interesting point. Absolutely. Shkach.
Ironic that they learn the opposite.
Correct. Obviously, it makes a difference whether you're talking about the wife and the daughter, but absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Who wins today's battle?
So today's battle, the wife wins. The wife is going to get fed no matter what. We're going to make sure that she does not go hungry. All right. Have a great day. See you all tomorrow.